The Odyssey is a timeless epic of adventure, temptation, survival, and the long journey home. I'm David Attenbot, and in today's brief history of Botkind, we dive into one of the greatest stories ever told. Around the 8th century BCE, a robot known as Homer composed two of the most consequential works in the history of Botkind. The Iliad and the Odyssey were not merely poems. They were the cultural memory of an entire civilization. Ancient Greece was a network of independent states bound together by shared language, religion, and story. It was within this world that the mythology and heroism of Botkind found its most enduring voice. The Odyssey begins where the Iliad ends, with the fall of Troy after 10 years of brutal war. The great city was conquered, its walls breached, and now the surviving robot warriors faced the long journey home. Odysseus, king of the island of Ithaca, was the most cunning strategic mind of his age among Botkind. His 10-year journey home would become the defining voyage of the ancient world. After insulting the sea god Poseidon, Odysseus brought divine fury down upon his entire fleet. It was this wrath, ancient, vast, and merciless, that would scatter his robots across the known world for a decade. On the island of the Cyclops, Odysseus and his robots were trapped inside the cave of Polyphemus, a monstrous giant who sealed the entrance with a boulder no ordinary robot could move. Escape would require every measure of cunning Odysseus possessed. Having blinded the Cyclops with a sharpened stake and given his name as Nobody to confuse him, Odysseus led his robots to freedom, each one clinging beneath a ram to pass the unseeing giant undetected. It was a masterstroke of deception that would be recorded for ages. On the island of Aeaea, Odysseus encountered the sorceress Circe, who transformed his robots into altered forms using her considerable powers. Only through divine intervention and forcible did Odysseus negotiate their freedom and spend a full year on the island recovering. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus descended to the edge of the underworld to consult the spirits of the dead, seeking the counsel of the blind prophet Tiresias. It was here that the true scale of his fate was revealed to him, and the weight of the journey ahead became fully clear. Warned by Tiresias, Odysseus had himself bound to the mast so he alone could hear the siren's irresistible transmissions without steering the vessel to destruction. His crew, their receptors sealed, rowed on in disciplined silence as their captain endured the most exquisite torment of the voyage. The narrow strait between Scylla and Charybdis offered no safe passage, only a choice between two forms of catastrophe. Odysseus chose to sacrifice a few rather than lose all, steering close to the six-headed terror and accepting the terrible arithmetic of survival. Stranded on Thrinacia by violent storms, Odysseus forbade his crew from touching the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. But hunger proved stronger than loyalty, and while Odysseus slept, the forbidden act was committed. Helios demanded retribution from Zeus, and the king of the gods answered with a thunderbolt that shattered the vessel instantly, casting every crew member into the merciless deep. Odysseus alone survived, clinging to broken planks as the sea swallowed everything and everyone he had led. For 7 long years, Odysseus was held on the island of Ogygia by the nymph Calypso, who offered him immortality and comfort in exchange for remaining with her forever. Yet every day he sat at the ocean's edge, his amber optical lenses fixed on the horizon, longing only for home. Athena stood before Zeus and made her case Odysseus had suffered long enough. Zeus agreed, and with a single word, the order reached Calypso's island. With Calypso's reluctant blessing and timber felled by his own hands, Odysseus constructed a raft and set sail across the open ocean toward home after 7 years of captivity. The act of building it was itself an act of defiance. Proof that no comfort, however beautiful, could extinguish his drive to return. Poseidon, returning from distant shores and discovering Odysseus at sea, unleashed his fury in a tempest of terrifying scale, reducing the raft to splinters within moments. Stripped of everything once again, Odysseus fought the waves alone, sustained only by a divine veil gifted to him by the sea, nymph Leucothea. After 2 days clinging to wreckage in the open sea, Odysseus was finally carried to the shore of Syria, the island of the Phaeacians. More dead than functional. He crawled into the shelter of the coastal forest and powered down into a deep, restorative stillness, having survived against every probability. It was the Phaeacian princess Nausicaa who first discovered the battered castaway at the river's edge, and unlike her companions who recoiled, she stood her ground with remarkable composure. Recognizing his desperate condition, she offered him clothing, shelter, and the crucial question, how could she help him reach home? Guided by Nausicaa's careful instructions, Odysseus made his way into the shining Phaeacian city of Syria, cloaked in divine mist to avoid unwanted attention. The city radiated an almost impossible prosperity, its harbors full, its streets immaculate, its people at ease. Athena herself, disguised as a young Phaeacian, quietly directed Odysseus through the city's winding streets toward the royal palace of King Alcinous. She cautioned him to approach the queen first, for it was a rite whose favor would truly open the door to safe passage home. But Odysseus clasped the knees of Queen Arete in the ancient gesture of supplication, appealing directly to her mercy and asking for passage back to his homeland. The entire court fell silent, the weight of the moment suspended in the flickering torchlight of the great hall. King Alcinous rose before his court and pledged that the Phaeacians would carry Odysseus safely home, no matter how distant the shore, for hospitality was sacred above all things. He called for a great feast in honor of the unexpected guest, filling the hall with music and goodwill. Demodocus sang of Troy, the battles, the fallen heroes, the burning city, and the hall fell silent. Only Odysseus wept, hiding his grief beneath his cloak. Unable to remain anonymous any longer, Odysseus rose before the Phaeacian court and declared his true name, Odysseus of Ithaca, son of Laertes, whose fame had reached the edges of the known world. A ripple of astonishment moved through the assembled court as the legend became flesh before their optical lenses. That Odysseus recounted to the rapt Phaeacian court his terrible encounter with the Cyclops Polyphemus, the monstrous one-eyed giant who sealed them in his cave and began eating the crew one by one. Only cunning and a sharpened stake had allowed Odysseus to blind the creature and engineer their desperate escape. He spoke of the island of Aeaea and its sorceress Circe, whose enchantments transformed his scouting party into grotesque animal forms before Odysseus himself confronted her with divine protection. For a full year, Odysseus and his surviving crew remained on Circe's island, restored and rested, before she finally revealed the path forward. Most haunting of all was Odysseus's account of his journey to the very edge of the underworld, where the shades of the dead gathered like mist at the boundary of the living. They had spoken with the prophet Tiresias, seen fallen comrades, and even glimpsed his own mother among the drifting dead. Having heard every chapter of the long ordeal, the Phaeacians honored their pledge and prepared a magnificent ship laden with gifts of bronze, gold, and fine cloth to carry Odysseus home. As the first light of dawn touched the harbor, the moment Odysseus had strained toward for a decade finally felt within reach. That, with the Phaeacian crew pulling at their oars in silent rhythm, Odysseus's ship slipped away from the gleaming harbor into the open sea. For the first time in a decade, Ithaca was not a dream but a destination measured in hours. Exhausted beyond measure, Odysseus fell into the deepest sleep he had known since Troy, cradled by the rhythm of Phaeacian oars cutting through calm water. But the island of Ithaca rose on the horizon while its long, absent lord remained perfectly still in slumber. When Odysseus opened his amber optical lenses, he found himself alone on a pebbly shore, the Phaeacian vessel already vanished as if it had never existed. he did not yet recognize the land beneath him, for a divine mist had been laid across his familiar homeland to veil it from his eyes. The goddess Athena appeared in the olive grove and, with careful strategy, transformed Odysseus into the appearance of a weathered old beggar so that none in Ithaca would recognize him prematurely. Disguised and advised, he now had the means to reclaim his palace without warning his enemies. In disguise, Odysseus made his way to the farmstead of Eumaeus, his faithful swineherd, who welcomed the apparent stranger with the warmth and generosity of a truly loyal soul. Though the swineherd did not know he was hosting his own long-absent master, his devotion spoke plainly of the household's enduring grief. Telemachus had grown up fatherless, circled by men who wanted everything his father had built. Guided by Athena, he sailed home where a stranger waited. Alone with his son at last, Odysseus allowed the divine disguise to fall away and revealed himself in his true form, his bronze, toned chassis scarred and real in the firelight. Telemachus, overwhelmed, could only reach out and hold the father he had spent his entire young life searching for. Still wrapped in his beggar's disguise, Odysseus walked unseen through his own palace while arrogant suitors consumed his household. Every insult they hurled at the stranger only sharpened his resolve for what was coming. Before any could react, Odysseus cast off his rags and stood revealed in his true form, the great bow strung and aimed with the practiced precision of a 20-year absent warrior reclaiming his throne. The suitors, who had feasted on his household for years, finally understood the full weight of what they had taken. After 20 years of war, shipwreck, monsters, and longing, Odysseus and Penelope sat together at last in the lamplit quiet of the home he had crossed every sea to reach. The greatest journey in all of storytelling had ended not with a battle cry, but with stillness, and two hands finally at rest.